Welcome back to my channel, Tabitha's Crochet World. Today is all about single crochet. The last video I shared was about how to get a slip knot on your hook and then how to make some chains. This is the beginning of a lot of patterns where you're just going to be working back and forth in rows. I'm using Michael's Cuddle Craft Tube yarn, which is great for beginners. It's very easy to see the stitches and know where to put your hook. So let's get started. So I still have my loop on my hook, and when you go to start crocheting backwards into these chains to create the next row, you're not going to crochet into this first, I'll show you right here, this first chain beside your hook. You're going to go into the second chain. So there's one, there's two. And the reason why we do this is once we take and crochet into that second chain from the hook, this first chain is actually going to become what is the turning chain. And a turning chain is what allows you to create height and go up to a next row. So I'm going to show you that here. So to create a single crochet, it's a lot like that same movement with a chain, except we're going to be taking our hook and inserting it through this top loop of the chain. You can see that the chain looks kind of like a V. There's the top and there's the bottom. So we're going to stick our hook right under that top loop. We're going to yarn over, pull that yarn back through, and now we have two loops on our hook. To complete the single crochet, we just yarn over again. We don't stick our hook back through that loop in the chain. We just yarn over and pull it through both of those loops. And that is your single crochet, and you always will end up with a loop on your hook. So let's try that again. Here's the next chain. Okay, you can see that's where we just worked into. Here is our next chain. So we slide our hook through that top loop, yarn over, we're grabbing that yarn, pulling it back through that same loop we just made. Now we have two loops on the hook. We yarn over again and pull through both loops. And we just continue down the chain that we made. You go into the next chain under that top loop, yarn over, and in my last video I showed how to do that as well. So we're basically just sticking our hook under that yarn. The yarn is on top, and we're grabbing it and pulling it through. There's our two loops on our hook, yarn over again, and pull it through. This is where tension is really important, like I talked about in my last video. You don't want to be pulling it so tight that you can't be able to pull the yarn through the loops. So you can see I'm keeping a nice tension on the yarn, but I'm not pulling so tight that then I can't pull it through here. And I'm not tightening on it either after I pull it through. That's where practice comes in with tension and being able to control that yarn so that you're not having to tug on it because it's too loose, or you're doing this now and it's tight, and then when you go to do the next single crochet, you have a hard time pulling it through those loops because it's so tight. And you don't want that. So just nice smooth motions. Let's speed it up a little bit to get down to the end of the row. And yes, this first row is normal for it to curl up some. It will flatten out, it'll straighten out once you do some more rows. Now I want to show you what it looks like once we're at the end. So I know a common mistake that I made a lot when I was first crocheting is I was skipping that last stitch. Um, when I was crocheting, it's hard to see where it's up against that slip knot sometimes. My rows would keep getting shorter and shorter. I really highly suggest that you count your stitches in each row until you take and get more practice and experience with it. Definitely even use a stitch marker in this last chain at the end to make sure that you always crochet into it. Sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging than the other stitches to stick your hook through there because you do have that slip knot on that side. Sometimes you have to really search for that chain to be able to get your hook in there, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over and pull through again to complete that stitch. And what you're looking for once you successfully get to the end of the row, you're going to notice that your last stitch is lining up with that slip knot. If it's not, if you still have it, I'm going to undo that. If you're ending your row right here and your slip knot is over here, that tells you right there that you have missed a stitch and you've missed that last stitch. So always count and also just eyeball it and make sure that your last single crochet is ending right there where that slip knot is that we began with. Okay, so what do you do after you single crochet all the way across and you get to the end of the row? Well, that's where you chain one. So this goes back to what I showed you in my last video, is where you just yarn over, pull it through that loop on your hook, and now you have a new loop on your hook. And then to turn your work, you just flip it horizontally. Okay, so now we're working on the back side. It's going to look a little bit different. And the stitches are going to look a little bit different because now we're no longer going to be working into the chain. We're going to be working into single crochet stitches. Okay, so that chain I just did, again, it's just like what we did back here when we did not crochet into that first chain beside our hook. We use that as a turning chain. And all it does is that turning chain, I'm going to flip it back around. There it is. It creates height. It takes you up. You can see how I went from down here to up here. It creates height for you to be able to then make another row. So this is the tricky part also, is you've got to know where now to crochet into. So here's the chain. It's right beside the loop that's on our hook. Beside the chain is that first single crochet. So we don't ever crochet into that chain that we just made. It looks like a V, just like this looks like a V, but that's our turning chain. That's what's giving us the height to go up. We want to make sure we skip that and we go into that first single crochet. So this time there's two loops that we're going to be sticking our hook under. We're going to insert it like that, yarn over again, and pull through both loops. Okay, so let me show you a different viewpoint of that. So there's the two loops for the single crochet that's on top. We stick our hook, let me get that out of the way, under both of those loops. You can see that V on my hook. You yarn over, pull it through, yarn over again, and pull through both loops. And that is how you single crochet and that is a stitch that you find most commonly in amigurumi. If that is something that you're interested in, this is a stitch that you have to master because that is what you mostly, the stitch that you use for amigurumi is the chains and the single crochet. But just like that. And you can see where I've already been doing some other single crochets. You see those V's? That's what it's going to look like at the top of your stitch. So going down the row, I want to show you what it looks like when we get to the end. And sometimes it's going to mess up. Like I just did there. I didn't have the right tension. I was tugging on the yarn a second ago. It's okay. That's the wonderful thing is if it messes up, you can always pull your hook out and redo it. So I want to show you again here at the very end. So we don't have the slip knot on this end. It's now on the opposite end where we turned our work, but you kind of have to just still eyeball it. You can see here's where you just ended, but there's all this length right here that it needs a stitch. There's our last stitch. You kind of have to flip your work a little bit there at the end to kind of see it clearly. It's a lot harder with regular worsted weight yarn or bulky yarn, but that's what you're looking for is that last stitch. You can see we have not made it to the end of the row yet. We still have another whole stitch right there. So you slide it under those last two, yarn over, see, and then yarn over again. And now you can see you've gotten all the way to the end of the row because your stitch and your hook lines up with the end of that previous row that you just crocheted. So that's what you're looking for. And that is how you single crochet.